All right, guys. Today we have a very, very important video. This is literally the most important video I've reacted to on my channel. I don't know what this video is about, but when I saw the title, and if you hear a lot of shit in the background, they're working on shit in my house. But I looked at the title and I'm like, bro, this is super important because I have felt a whole bunch of brain changes and a whole bunch of just crazy things throughout this journey of meditation. And I just really, truly want to see what this video is about. By the way, this guy is a very great source. He literally has it right here. He's a licensed doctor from the US. So, and on top of that, this dude was a monk. And bro, he's just a very great source. Like of just psychology, mental health, all of that. So this dude is a very great source. Let's watch this video.
Today, we're going to talk about the neuroscience of
Dog, like I've been feeling a lot, so I'm ready to see this, bro. This could potentially be the solution. Maybe, probably not. Probably.
enlightenment. So if you look at these Eastern spiritual traditions, they have this concept of moksha, or
Y'all probably not hearing this like good enough, so I'm gonna turn it all the way up.
liberation, enlightenment, this state of basically permanent happiness, which is impervious to all of the vagaries of the world around us. But if we look at the science, we don't really see a whole lot of evidence of that, right? So we have these studies on meditation or mindfulness that will show reductions in anxiety or improvements in quality of life, but no one using a mindfulness app is becoming permanently happy for the rest of their life. So it seems like we don't really have any neuroscience evidence of enlightenment. Or do we? Oh. So today we're going to understand the neuroscientific mechanisms of enlightenment. How to cultivate particular things in your life that will lead you to happiness that could be a little bit more permanent, that could be a little bit more impervious to your circumstances. Which may sound really confusing because if we look at happiness research, it actually points us in the opposite direction. There's studies that show that, for example, if you have lots of friends, you're more likely to be happy. If you make more than $100,000 a year, you're more likely to be happy. These are all correlational studies that basically look at the circumstances of your life and will basically tell you, okay, the better your circumstances are, the more likely you are to be happy. So if you were born with a silver spoon,
but like that's the thing. Like people, there are people who are literally like not born in many good circumstances who are happy, and there are people who are in very good circumstances and they're freaking depressed. So let's see what he gives us here.
in your mouth and a gold spoon up your butt, then good luck. You won the lottery and you're more likely to be happy. The challenge with all of these studies on happiness is that they don't really give us actionable information. Right? So the secret to happiness is making a bunch of money.
Yeah, so like all these studies, they're very materialistic. So like they'll just be like, oh, you have to have good RNG, which is like totally out of your control. Like where I'm from, who I am, my skin color, all that shit. It's literally not even controllable. Not a single thing I can do that's within my control. So like they have to show us an actionable step to be happy.
And having a lot of friends, that's not necessarily something you can control. It's a huge problem because you can move in that direction, but ultimately people may not like you. You may get fired from your job. You can't just wake up tomorrow and make 100 grand. And as I've seen in my clinical experience, it's not clear that money buys happiness. Money does buy security, which can be one of the components of unhappiness or fear or anxiety.
Facts.
But it's not like making infinitely more money actually increases your happiness. So what does the neuroscience of happiness tell us? What do we know about sort of principles of neuroscience that could give us a clue?
And it's crazy because people still think money buys you happiness when it's just security. I heard low tier God say one time that people with a lot of money are never depressed. I think he either said they aren't, it's either he said they aren't depressed or they're happy. I personally, low tier God, knowing him and how smart he is, I think he said they aren't depressed, which is very true. You cannot have a lot of money and be depressed. That you have so much security in your life. Like you don't have to live in the hood no more. You don't have to do all that crazy stuff to just eat food. Nah, you're not depressed. You can't be unhappy. It's impossible.
Tell us, what do we know about sort of
But you're
principles
not.
in
You
neuroscience
can't. You can't be happy. That's not a guarantee.
that could give us a clue how we can be happy in spite of our circumstances? And thankfully, there's a lot of great evidence of this. We're going to start with dopamine. So this is our basic pleasure chemical. And the yogis say that chasing our desires, or basically satisfying our dopaminergic system, will not lead to happiness. And it turns out that they're right. So here's
Facts.
what we know about the
Literally.
dopaminergic system. So anytime we get a release of dopamine, we get some amount of pleasure, and then we also get some amount of anticipation. So this is what dopamine does. Anytime dopamine gets released, we feel good, and we get anticipation, and we get behavioral reinforcement. So I'm kind of lumping those two together. So when we talk about anticipation, the other way to think about it is craving. So anytime I do something dopaminergic, I enjoy it and I want more. Now this would be totally great if it were not for one fundamental feature of life, which is this fucking thing called adaptation. So all living organisms adapt, right? They don't just live this.
So you know what he's finna say, y'all? Well, I'm gonna just say it right now. What he's about to say is this: you crave something. Let's say it's a piece of cake, right? You get a piece of cake, you eat it, it tastes good as hell. Then the next day, you're like, damn, that cake was good, but I want something more. I want more of that cake. So then you ate 1.5 of that cake. Next day you eat 2 of that cakes, 3 of that cakes. And you keep adapting to this and the new normal to even just operate as a human being, to not even barely operate as a human being. You already need 5 slices of cake because your dopamine system is producing more. It's what they talk about with the porn habit. Motherfucking, you watch that shit once for the first time and you just keep watching it, watching it, and watching it, and then you start watching really weird stuff, and it can get to even weirder and weirder stuff because you just need something to snap you up. You know what I'm saying? Because that shit does not get you up anymore. The normal shit doesn't get you up. Even nothing about it is normal, but just damn, that's crazy. It's crazy. That's what he's gonna say.
All living organisms adapt, right? They don't just live the same way over and over again. And this is why dopamine will forever be a trap. So let's understand this. Let's say I play a video game. So I get 5 units of pleasure. And then what happens is my brain is like, that was great. Let's get some more. And so then I have 5 units of anticipation or craving. I want to play again, right? I want to achieve what I achieved the first time. The problem is that when I get these 5 units of anticipation, I also get 1 unit of adaptation. So what that basically means is we develop a tolerance. So this is a feature of human evolution, life evolution, really. So, for example, like, you can drink 1 cup of coffee, the first cup of coffee in your whole life, and you'll be, like, wired forever. But as you develop a tolerance, what literally happens with dopamine is that we remove dopamine receptors from our cells. So the maximum dopamine signal that we can receive actually goes down. So let's look at what happens practically, right? So I do this action once, and I get 5 units of pleasure. I get 5 units of anticipation, and I get 1 unit of tolerance. So now the second time I engage in the activity, I only get 4 units of pleasure because I have this 1 unit of adaptation, so my maximal pleasure goes down. The problem, though, is that the craving is based on this. The craving actually doesn't go down. The craving remains the same. So now as I engage in the second round of the behavior, I get 1 more unit of tolerance and only 4 units of pleasure. So this wasn't quite as fun.
So I was wrong, y'all. Well, I wasn't wrong, but I wasn't right. You know what I'm saying? So that's crazy. Like, the anticipation stays the same, but the pleasure goes down. Like, I knew that, but I didn't explain that just now. It's crazy, bro.
So now what I end up with is a 1 unit of deficit, right? Because I have 5 units of craving. I want this much fun, but this game wasn't that much fun. So what do I do again? Let me play again. So then I play another round. And now I have 2 stacking units of tolerance, okay? So I end up with 3 units of pleasure, 5 units of craving, a delta of 2, and another unit of tolerance. And if you look at any pleasurable activity in life, this is basically what you will find, right? So the first time you play through a game, oh my God, it's so much fun, it's so epic. And I saw a thread recently where people were like, if you could wipe one game out of your mind and have amnesia, which game would you pick so that you could experience it for the first time? So embedded in that idea is that the first time we do things is the most pleasurable, right? Except for losing the virginity, because we don't know how to have sex yet. Anyways, that's a conversation for a different day. And
wait.
Idea is that the first time we do things is the most pleasurable, right? Except for losing the virginity, because we don't know how to have sex yet. Anyways, that's a conversation for a different day. And so this is the core problem with dopamine, which is that if we are relying on it for pleasure, there are diminishing returns.
For sure.
And so the yogis sort of figured this out, and they said, well, hold on a second. If we're chasing pleasure in life, it will...
The yogis, the hermits, the senseis, the masters, the monks. Oh my gosh, bro.
Figured this out, and they said, well, hold on a second. If we're chasing pleasure in life, it will never lead to sustained happiness. And we see this very practically, right? So we'll have people who will chase one dopaminergic activity after another dopaminergic activity after another dopaminergic activity. And some people will even develop almost like their life is an art of hedonism, right? So they'll try to figure out, I've worked with patients, for example, who have polysubstance use. So what does that mean? That means they're not just addicted to one substance, they're addicted to a lot of substances. And how does that work? It's because this principle of tolerance. So the first time around, I'm going to do THC. But since I get diminishing returns on that, now I'm going to use Adderall to get 5 units because it's a new source of stimulus. And then I'm going to play a video game, which is 5 units. And then I'm going to basically rotate between dopaminergic activities. So you'll have some people who will try to develop this sort of perfect hedonistic lifestyle where I'm eating really good and I'm playing video games and I'm having sex and I'm doing drugs, and it sounds awesome. But over time, these people are not happy. I think a great example of this, if y'all are familiar with Mike Posner, and he made this famous song called "I Took a Pill in Ibiza," and then many years later, he had this awesome
Do y'all know who that is? I don't know. Maybe I'm slow as fuck, nigga. I don't know who that is. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Made this famous song called "I Took a Pill in Ibiza," and then many years later, he had this awesome Instagram story or whatever. He was talking about his journey and how he used to chase pleasure and where he is now. It's super inspirational and stuff. But the key thing that I found is that people will try to rotate between different pleasures, and you'll notice that you do this too. Because after playing the same game for a little while, you want to switch to a different game. You want to watch something. Maybe watch some anime. Maybe do something else fun. Maybe go out drinking. We rotate between dopaminergic things, but it never leads to sustained happiness. Hey, y'all, if you're interested in applying some of the principles that we share to actually create change in your life, check out Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health. It comes in So check out the link in the bio and start your journey today.
I'm sorry, I
don't the yogis talk about.
I skip all of that. Y'all can watch that for yourselves. I skip all of those types of stuff. Sponsors, all that, nah.
Ego. So they say that as long as you have an ego, you will not have sustained happiness. Now, it turns out that neuroscience actually supports this as well. So oftentimes we have this sense of identity, right? So I say, oh, I'm all oak, and let's say I feel like I'm not happy with the way that I look. And we have this idea that if I'm unhappy with something about myself, fixing that thing will lead to more happiness, right? So if I get in shape, I will be more happy. Seems very, very logical, seems very, very simple.
Very logical.
A fact of life. But if we look at the neuroscience of it, that's not true. So if we look at our ego, our sense of identity, chances are this has to do with a part of our brain called the default mode network. So this is it's really a circuit. It's not like an anatomical part. It's connections between different parts of the brain. And when the default mode network is active, we are thinking about ourselves. And it turns out that when I am unhappy about my body, it's not the part of my body that actually causes my unhappiness. It is the fact that I am thinking about myself. This is really where the unhappiness comes from. So I want y'all to think about your own experience, right? So when you reflect too much on yourself, and we see this a lot in depression. So for example, like in studies on depression, we know that these patients have a hyperactive default mode network. So what that means is that they're constantly thinking about themselves. And even if one thing gets fixed, the default mode network is still active and it will find something else to think about. So when I work with people who have highly active default mode networks or very depressed, even if something goes right in their life, they don't feel satisfied because the mind finds something else. We also see this in cases of things like anorexia or body dysmorphia, where it isn't fixing a particular thing that leads to happiness. It is the fact that this part, the self-critical part of your brain, the part of your brain that is thinking about you and judging you, your ego, as long as it is active, you will be unhappy. No amount of progress, no amount of facial surgeries or buccal fat removals or Botox injections will fix body dysmorphia. That's the nature of it. And what do we know about the neuroscience of these conditions? It is high activity of the default mode network. It also follows, and we have clinical evidence of this, that disabling the default mode network is what leads to relief. So when someone is depressed about their life, fixing all of the problems that they perceive doesn't necessarily lead to happiness. Fixing is what leads to relief. So when someone is depressed about their life, fixing all of the problems that they perceive doesn't necessarily lead to happiness. The fastest way to stop someone from being depressed is actually a ketamine infusion. So I don't recommend that you'll go abusing it. If you get prescribed, that's a different story. But what we know is that ketamine is a dissociative agent, which means that it unplugs us from our sense of self. We also know that the default mode network can sometimes be disactivated or deactivated by psychedelics. Once again, I don't recommend that. And this is very surprising and shocking. Turns out that meditation is a very good way to deactivate the default mode network. So once again, it seems like the yogis were onto something when they said, remove your ego from the equation, because once the default mode network gets deactivated, this is when we're happy. It is not in satisfying our views of ourselves that are not very good that actually leads to happiness. It can lead to progress and some degree of contentment. But that too depends on whether the default mode network is active when you are done. So if I feel unhappy about my body, the question is, after I work out, what happens to my default mode network? The more active it is, the more unhappy I will remain, whereas oftentimes what happens when we move in the right direction is we actually disable the default mode network. So that's still the key principle at play. The third principle that we're going to do in what happens to my default mode network. The more active it is, the more unhappy I will remain, whereas oftentimes what happens when we move in the right direction is we actually disable the default mode network. So that's still the key principle at play. The third principle that we're going to talk about is living in the present.
So then it comes back? Because in the process of removing it, when we gain progress, we're also gaining it back, because I'm gaining progress on my arm. I want that bitch to look bigger. You know what I'm saying? I'm gaining progress, and obviously I'm losing my sense of self, but isn't it getting stronger in the end because I wanted myself to look bigger? I know I'm rambling a little bit, but it's just a question. It's kind of crazy.
Which is really fantastic, because everyone's like, oh yeah, man, I'm trying to like live in the present. So like, I'm not going to pay rent, and I'm not going to pay you back because that's in the...
Oh my God, I have to cut. All right, we're back.
present. So like, I'm not going to pay rent, and I'm not going to pay you back because that's in the future, and I'm living in the present. So I'm gonna do what I want. I'm gonna live in the present. I'm gonna play video games. I'm gonna get hot.
Hey, this is important, because people think. I remember I posted a video on my story, and I said, live in the present. There's nowhere to be except now. Something about that. You could die today, you could die tomorrow. I mean, you could die something, whatever. I forgot what I said. I was like, you just got to be here now. And I said that a long time ago. And somebody commented under, he's like, oh yeah, bro, if you live in the present, bro, I just feel like you're not going to really get anything done because you're not looking towards the future. You're not looking towards what has to be done. And I'm like, that's a very good point, but you're living for the moment, not in the moment. You see, living in the moment does not mean not thinking about the past and present, because think about the past and the future, because that is a form of living in the present. You can think about the past and the future. That's perfectly normal. But like living for the moment is when you don't think about that, and you don't think about the consequences that happen later. Do you see what I'm saying? This is why he's doing this, because people think that when we say live in the present, they think of this. Oh man, just so that means it doesn't really matter what happens later, so I'm just do what happens now. But that's not true. You know what I'm saying?
Future, and I'm living in the present, so I'm gonna do what I want. I'm gonna live in the present. I'm gonna play video games. I'm gonna get hot. It's gonna be great. I'm living in the present. Turns out that living in the present is absolutely a fantastic idea. And the reason for that is because our brain is honestly a little bit scuffed. There's one basic problem with living in the future. So if we look at the neuroscience of our brain, when we project into the future, we can actually experience a hypothetical pain, but we cannot experience a hypothetical pleasure. So I'll give you all just a simple example of this, okay? So if you look at someone who's stuck in an anxiety loop, they're worrying about the future. And then if you literally look in their brain when someone is having in an anxiety loop or a panic attack, the parts of their brain that experience, okay, so this means the feeling of it, the experience, not hypothetical, the parts of their brain that experience negative emotion are active. So when you are thinking about a future negative event, you can literally feel pain. You can feel shame, you can feel guilt, you can feel fear. All of these negative emotions are possible from hypotheticals. And this is what's so terrifying when I work with people who struggle with anxiety, because they don't just have one, they don't experience the pain of one bad outcome. They experience the pain of 100 bad outcomes. They're thinking this could happen and that hurts. Oh my God, that hurts. And then I'll be embarrassed and then this will happen and then oh my God, that hurts. And oh my God, that hurts. And oh my God, that hurts. And it's crazy because they're literally experiencing more pain through these hypotheticals than they would if this action actually happened and only one outcome happened. Even one bad outcome is 1 unit of pain, but they're projecting into the future and they experience a lot of pain. Now, the scuffed thing about our brain is that this doesn't work for pleasure. Our brain does not hypothesize pleasure and get a spurt of dopamine, right? Like you can be anxious about the future and feel like ashamed and your heart rate will go up and all this kind of crap. That can happen here and now, but you can't think about playing video games and get that rush of dopamine. You can't think about having sex and get the pleasure of an orgasm. Our brain is just not designed to do that, and that's what's so scuffed. And we see this a lot in studies on things like neuroeconomics, where I'll ask you, okay, you have a 100% chance to get $100. I can just give you $100 right now, or there's a 50% chance to get $250. Which one do you pick, right? And the majority of human beings, even though we know that statistically $250 on average I will get $125, I value the 100 guaranteed more than the potential loss of nothing. So if we really look at it in our brain, the way we make calculations, losses are worth more than gains. They're valued at a higher rate, and this is a principle of biology. This is baked into our neuroscience. And what is the mechanism of that? The reason that our brain values losses more than gains is because of this basic principle of a hypothetical pain being experienced in the present. So as you're thinking about, do I want $100 in my hand, but what if I don't get anything? What if I get zero? That hurts so much. So that tiny amount of hurt versus the pleasure of, oh crap, I've got $250. That's awesome, right? That sort of discrepancy between the way that our brain actually works makes it so that losses feel more real and will cause suffering. So what do the yogis do? The yogis conclude very easily that, okay, so don't live in the future because it's a rigged game, right?
It's a
so if
rigged
you're living
game,
in the future,
sure.
you can experience the pain, but you can't experience the pleasure. Therefore, live in the present. So another great example of this is casinos, because casinos operate on this same principle, but in the opposite direction. A casino is basically designed by the most evil yogi on the planet. Because what do casinos try to incentivize you to do? The reason
Quote the mantra every day.
but in the opposite direction. A casino is basically designed by the most evil yogi on the planet. Because what do casinos try to incentivize you to do? The reason they keep people hooked is because they prevent you from thinking about your future losses. Because they know that if you start thinking about the future losses, then you will have a huge problem. So they'll even do things like they'll change the lighting in the casino so you have no sense of time. right? Whether it's day or night, it all looks the same. They're literally implementing things that remove the realm of time from your brain. We can also look at things like anytime you lose, they don't let you dwell on it. So the moment that you pull something on a slot machine, there's anticipation, anticipation, anticipation. Didn't work, and then you can just pull again. When I work with people who are gambling addicts, and casinos will design this on purpose, you're actually playing with 6 slot machines at the same time. I had a patient who would walk down and back, pulling levers, pulling levers, pulling levers, pulling levers, right? They're not thinking at all about the future dimension. They're actually engaged in a lot of sensory stimuli, and anytime there's a loss, you can pull again and you can focus on the present. So they're keeping you relentlessly focused on the present. And they do this with the winning as well. Because when you lose, it's not like there's some womp 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 womp. No, 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 no. The second that you lose, you can pull again and you can play. But what about when you win? When you win, there's lots of money, and the money comes out slow, right? It's not like they credit your account. It's like the money comes shooting out, and you have to spend a lot of time picking it up, and there's lots of noise and lots of lights, and everyone's paying attention, and so they are bringing you to the present, bringing you to the present, bringing you to the present. So they bring you to the present to experience pleasure, and they keep you away from the future in terms of avoiding pain and removing the dimension of time. It's actually brilliant, if not predatory. The last thing that the yogis kind of talk about is one point
That
of
makes sense. It's like, so it makes so much sense why you would bet your life on a summon in like a some type of like gotcha game, because even though summoning, like, bro, most of the time you get shafted and you just like literally never get the unit. That hit of getting the unit is so hard, and it just blocks you out, because if you, and it's like, damn, that shit doesn't even make you want to quit, it just makes you come back. It's crazy.
brilliant, if not predatory. The last thing that the yogis kind of talk about is one-pointedness of the mind. And they say as long as your mind is one-pointed, you will be closer to happiness. So let's take a look at this. So if we look at a lot of the nature of emotional suffering or mental suffering, if we look at psychiatry, what we tend to find is that people who suffer have a two-track mind. So if we look at something like social anxiety, if I go out on a date and I have social anxiety, I'm not focused on the task. I'm not with this person 100%. 50% of me is on the date, and 50% of me is running the commentary. Subtitles, director's cut, thinking about, oh, does this person like this? Does this person not like this? So what we tend to find is that anytime we have a two-track mind, it will lead to suffering. Because what is that second track? It is a commentary on the experience of life itself, right? So even if I'm doing something like, let's say I'm taking a test, and there's a question that I don't know, I can try to answer that question. But the simplest way to improve or make my suffering worse, to increase my suffering, let's say that, is to think about the consequences of getting the action wrong. So I don't know the answer to this question, right? That is some amount of pain. Fair enough. But if I start projecting, this means that I'm going to get a B on the test. This means that I'm going to get a B in the class. If I get one B in the class, it's impossible to get a 4.0. If I don't get a 4.0, I won't be able to go to medical school or law school or MBA or whatever. I won't get this scholarship. And then the cascade of events happens, right? So if you really pay attention, what you find is that suffering correlates with the fractured nature of the mind. And the opposite is also true. This is why we love non-boring video games. So what does a non-boring video game do? It keeps us 100% focused on the game at hand. What are the games that we enjoy the most? It's the ones, what are the ones that are this full of butt-clenching moments and on the edge of your seat, right? Like, it's like, we're right on the edge. And if you look at some of these, like, battle arena kind of games where the world is constantly shrinking, why do they do that? It's to keep you constantly engaged, keep you focused, keep you so that a moment of distraction costs you so much. Right? This is also why if
Oh, and so that's why when I lose, I heard this in neuroscience. Fuck, they were like, I think they were stimulating the prefrontal. I forgot what they were stimulating. They were stimulating a part of the brain, and they were talking about, and they put them in like a VR, and they put a storm in front of them. This was Dr. Huberman, by the way. He said instead of people being afraid of this storm, he said, "No, I want to go through it. Like I want to go through the storm." They got so stimulated from challenges. So like honestly, the risk to reward no, this is not risk to reward ratio. What? How can I explain this? The like if I lose in a game, it won't hurt as much as me losing in a test because a game is a lot funner than a test. I think that that is what this guy is saying. And so, I mean, like, what's the solution at this point? Like, there's no. I've never had a test in my life go. It's more of a prevention than an invention. You know, like it's more of like I'm not trying to win it like a test. I'm just trying to not fail. You know, I like in a game I'm always trying to win, but in a test I'm never trying to win. I'm just trying to pass. As long as I pass, I'm cool. That's most people.
A
So
moment of
what's the,
right,
I
like
think I missed
we're
it.
right on the edge. And if you look at some of these like you know, battle arena kind of games where the world is constantly shrinking, why do they do that? It's to keep you constantly engaged, keep you focused, keep you so that a moment of distraction costs you so
So
much,
much.
right? This is also why if you look at very simple game mechanics like damage to HP pools, a lot of times over time what we see in video games is the damage to HP pool is very favorable for like one-shotting things, right? So it's not like I have 1,000 health and I do 10 damage. I don't know if y'all remember this game War.
Go
The
back.
damage to HP pool is very favorable for like one-shotting things, right? So it's not like I have 1,000 health and I do 10 damage. I don't know if y'all remember this game War, which is a card game where it's like I flip over one card and you flip over one card, and whoever gets the higher card gets both of the cards, right? And the goal is to like wipe out the other person. This is the most fucking boring game on the planet because the HP pool is super high and
It's
the
super
DPS
high.
is super low. So we're sitting there, blah 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 blah. And what do you do when you play War? You're not like focused. You're like, oh my god, butt clenching moment. Like, what's gonna happen next? Which card? You're like, this is so fucking boring. Like, give me some other game. And games are designed in the exact opposite. They keep you one pointed. And so the yogis actually figured out that one pointedness of the mind correlates with happiness. This is why we love doing things that are in the flow state. Even work can be pleasurable if we can achieve flow because it's one pointedness of the mind. It's not the action, it's not the outcome, it is one pointedness. This is also why orgasm is so addictive because in the moment of orgasm, we have a one pointed mind. This is a physiologic and neuroscientific mechanism where all thoughts of the future, all thoughts of what the other person is it good for the other person too, all of those disappear from our mind. And when we think about something like the sexual act, right, which maybe not everyone can relate to, fair enough, but y'all will get.
Masturbation. I mean, like you could use masturbation. Like that's like the it's the same thing. Like it's not the exact same thing, but it's the same. Like most people from their experience, bro, they say sex is straight up overrated. Like honestly, like it's not something that like I would hype like shit. So I mean, like, bro, like me, it's the same thing with being your meat. Like, bro, you over here just rushing, you just doing that shit. Like you're not thinking about damn, man, should I edge? Like, no, you're just gonna do it all the way. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. But they so that you have to have a one pointed mind. But like, how can I get into a flow state on a test if I'm always critically thinking about myself? Like I can do this stuff with like video games, you know, editing a video probably or like doing something that I drawing, doing something that I truly enjoy basketball, doing something that I really like, but a test, like I just don't know. I don't think this will ever happen.
There one day. So if we think about the sexual act, that too, we can realize that the joy of this can be shattered if we ever stop for a second and think about the other person, right? So if we're just having sex and we're having fun, but the moment that we create a two-track mind, is it good for the other person? Are they enjoying it? Am I doing too much? Am I doing too little? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing this? That commentary in our head is where our suffering comes from. So it turns out that we actually do have a lot of evidence for this concept of enlightenment. It turns out that if we literally look at our neuroscience studies of the way that these different circuits of our brain work, it actually makes sense that if you are able to consistently implement these four things, which are, first of all, not chasing dopamine and pleasure because there's no way that'll lead to sustained happiness. Secondly, to disable the ego, which is literally what some of the strongest treatments in psychiatry are designed to do, is just literally unplug your ego. These are things like ketamine and psychedelics. Third thing is to focus on the present, because our brain is kind of scuffed. It's kind of scuffed. It's like rigged, that it can experience a hypothetical pain, but not experience a hypothetical pleasure. And the fourth is to be one-pointed with your mind. Now, the crazy thing is that if we implement these four things, what I have seen in my own life, and what I have literally helped hundreds of people do, is to become happy in their own lives. This is not about the circumstances of your life, and this is what's so powerful about this. See, the problem with $100,000 a year and being 6 feet tall, or if you're a woman having an hourglass shape and a thigh gap, right? I've worked with women who have worked so hard to get thigh gaps, because the thigh gap means happiness. So we go in our lives always trying to chase these external things. We try to achieve these particular things. We try to chase these particular pleasures. But that means that the true control, the decider of my happiness, is on the outside world. If I don't get a promotion, that means I'm unhappy. The crazy thing is that the yogis said, if you really stop and think about it, you can control perfect happiness. You can be permanently happy in spite of your circumstances. And the crazy thing is that as we look at this neuroscientific research, we know that it's not about particular outcomes. It is about activation and deactivation of particular parts of your brain. This is a scientific fact, right? So if my amygdala is active when I am panicking about something, this will lead to suffering. This is a scientific fact. When I'm not active, when my amygdala is not active and I'm not in anxiety, then I am blissful. We know this. This is also subjective experience. So the key thing is to cultivate these four things. And as you live in alignment to these principles, you will move closer to a permanent state of happiness.
That was a pretty good video. It was pretty good. I'm gonna say it was nice. I hope my face was not blocked the whole time. Bit self-conscious there. See, it did happen, but that was amazing. That's it.